Sanibonani, Dumelang, good evening, and welcome to episode 362 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. It's a Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast, and if you join us for the first time, welcome to the family. You're tuned into the leading property podcast in South Africa, catering to your property needs. And to all our regular viewers on Facebook, on Instagram, or of course, if you listen to us on any of the other streaming platforms, whether it's Spotify or of course Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your major podcasts, welcome to it. You are tuned into the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamantungwa Khumalo, where we're always tackling a hot property topic and making sure that we equip ourselves with as much knowledge to make better property decisions. And talking about equipping ourselves with the right knowledge, as you know, we're running a great competition on our Facebook page where we want to find out from you what have been some of the great nuggets and lessons that you have learned while watching the show. And all you have to do to enter that competition, where you stand a chance of walking away with 500 rands in cash, is to share with us some of the lessons that you have learned and to make sure that you tune in every single weekday at 7 p.m. and of course stand a chance of walking away with the cash prize. And if we call your name, all you have to do to claim the money is to drop us a message down here below before the end of the show, and you will walk away with the cash. And if the lucky winner doesn't claim their prize, we put the money right back in the money bag and it rolls on over to the following day. It's that simple. If you want to stand a chance of walking away with cash every single weekday right here on the Private Property Podcast, that is all you have to do. And of course, you know that there was other great shows that you can tune into right here across Private Property's social media pages. As it is a Thursday, you can catch Umbali Nwaka on the Farming Podcast, and she's on your screens every Thursdays and Tuesdays. And on Wednesdays, Is Clarkson brings you the First Time Home Buyers Show, where she's always in conversation with people who've gone, not just from buying that first property, but have grown their property portfolios from strength to strength. And of course, Mondays and Fridays, Chad brings you the Home Shoppers Show with an incredible tour of exquisite properties that you can find on www.privateproperty.co.za. Well, those are the great shows you can tune into every single weekday at 8 p.m. Make sure that you follow us across our social media platforms on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're on TikTok and LinkedIn. And you can follow myself at Zamantungwa_K on Instagram as well as on Twitter. Well, this evening, we're looking at something that I know we don't talk about very often. I was saying this to my guest of And it is one of those, topics that I know that so many of us want to be able to get good insight on, because it just seems and feels so far removed from us oftentimes, especially when we especially when you're very concerned or consume a lot of stuff around residential property. And this evening, we're going to be looking at the retail and service sector markets. And I'm going to be in conversation with Luanda Tlhotlhalemaje. That's Tlhotlhalemaje. We were actually saying I've written her surname in such a way that I can better read it. So I do apologize for that, Luanda. Luanda Tlhotlhalemaje, who's a commercial property specialist, and she brings with her over 20 years of experience from investment banking and asset management from a diverse list of industries. And she has a national and a global network of clients, which she brings to the property industry. And her key role is well supported through having a passion for property and being client as a central role property specialist. Luanda, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to actually be part of this show.
So one of the things Luanda shared with me off air is that she hardly does interview, and I think it's such a disservice, because somebody with her experience is somebody we need to be hearing more of. We often complain about not seeing a lot of Black women in particular speaking out when it comes to real estate. So I'm already just do more interviews, because we do need more of those voices in the mainstream media. And I'm sure that we're definitely going to be having her back on the show again. And now, to get to our conversation this evening, I think a good starting point is if you could give us sort of a general overview of the retail and service property market at the moment.
Okay, so with retail real estate, it's actually a market where investors look for properties that they can let out, for rental, for leasing out to other businesses, manage them, or with a view of also buying them at the end. We look at shopping centers are part of retail, supermarkets, pharmacies, and petrol stations. That's like an overview of who plays in that space when we talk about retail. So yes, there's more, but I'm just naming just a few.
And I think it's actually great that we're getting a good sense of what entails the market, or the scope of the market, because I know that some people at home probably don't have a good sense of we'll say how broad it is, or what it essentially captures. Now, can you just give us perhaps some of the key sort of concepts, or misconceptions rather, that we tend to find when it comes to the sector?
All right. So as a country, as South Africa, we all know that we've been through a lot. And as if the pandemic wasn't enough, we had to go through the looting as well in the middle of the year. And as short as it was, it seemed so long, because it actually made such a huge impact, because all the investors, they started pulling out some of their investments in the country. They started, selling some of their properties. And people who are passionate about their investments, once they move away, obviously you will find the facade that you find when you go to the city of Joburg, where you see dilapidated buildings. But one thing that we don't realize is the lot of work that as a country we are putting into that area, so that these misconceptions that people cannot invest in South Africa, they can be cleared, and we give them more backup and more time to actually, or maybe look at how best we can help them to bring their investments back into the country.
Luanda, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on South Africa's sort of commercial property and investment right now. Especially just given how many years you've been in the industry and been able to track some of the trends. Can you just share with us some of your thoughts about commercial property investment in the country at the moment?
Yes. So investments, as you know, at this point in time, it's a buyer's market. So we see a lot of assets changing hands. We see BE formed companies that are getting funds from like your state-owned entities and from your grants that are focusing in commercial space. And that on its own is actually helping our BE consortiums to gain momentum in terms of investing in those assets. However, with all the focus that has happened in the past, we've sort of felt like, especially as a BE consortiums, we had moved away from investing in commercial space because of the money issues. We don't have proper companies backing up with funding in terms of that. And also with the fear of the banks as well, looking at the type of loan to value that the bank would offer in terms of the commercial properties. Because, it takes so much. It's not just one thing that they look at. They look at what the rental income would be before they loan you. What is your loan to value to buy that property? And what sort of a credit are they going to give you? And sometimes they will tell you, we have a senior debt that we'll give you, but you still have to go to a private equity funder who can give you a shortfall. So all those dynamics have been the ones driving the change of assets from a certain group to the new upcoming property investors that are coming up in the country.
If you have just joined us this evening, I'm in conversation with Luanda Tlhotlhalemaje, who's a commercial property specialist, as we look at retail and service sector markets and seeing all the love that we're getting on our Facebook page. We've got Christine Dichaba, who's written us on Facebook saying first timer here. So she's one of our first, she's the first time rather for her to watch and tune into the show. So welcome to the family, Christine. We know that you're going to enjoy your time with us and definitely be watching future episodes. And I see Everencha Parichia, Michelle Volmarans, as well as Wongisiwe Duma, who are sending those green hearts on our Facebook page as we are in conversation talking retail and service sector markets. And of course, you know that we're also going to be announcing the lucky winner of that 500 rands in cash this evening. And I do hope that whoever's name comes out is in fact watching this evening. Now, Luanda, I think when we look at especially the commercial property developments, one of the things that we've realized is we're seeing a lot of work sort of going digital, and even some companies moving from bricks to mortar and trying to be sort of more online and as much as possible. I'm keen to hear your stance on the shift firstly to sort of online and what that means to bricks and mortar commercial entities. Because we know that oftentimes people try citing that retailers are no longer going to need a physical store because we can increasingly just do online shopping, as we're seeing with some retailers abroad. But of course, we're in a completely different context, completely different market. Perhaps can you just share your insight on that?
All right. Fortunately for us as the people of South Africa, we enjoy going out. So there's no way that we're going to cut out the retail sector. But what I am seeing, the trends that's going on right now is the merging of the physical to the digital. And it's working so beautifully because you, as the shopper, you get to decide how you want to shop. And having those options, because, as South Africans, we always, spend so much money on transport, going to the shopping mall, going to the city to try and find, a couple of things. These days, I see, a lot of scooters, running around, delivering at people's houses. And, it has opened a different way of us, like of shoppers, to shop in their favorite stores. that for me it's a win-win. So we're not going to get rid of retail anytime soon, because physical, it will remain physical, but it's how those stores will match their in-store with digital.
Of course, I want to take a quick break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to continue our conversation. We're going to find out who this evening's lucky winner is. Who's going to walk away with that 500 Rand cash prize. Let's take a look who we're going to give away that 500 Rand cash prize to. And that lucky winner this evening is Stilo CJ Ronaldo. Stilo CJ Ronaldo, I do hope that they're watching us. Do drop us a message down here below to claim that 500 Rands in cash. Of course, if he is not watching, if they're not watching, then it's going to roll on over to 1,000 Rands for tomorrow's show. I am this evening in conversation with Luanda Tlhotlhalemaje, who's a commercial property specialist, as we're looking at retail and service sector markets. Of course, taking your comments and questions at home as we explore something that I know we don't ordinarily tackle, but really need to get a good understanding of. And I see a number of you at home watching. Anelda Everton also asking there if Michelle Bulmarant is watching. She is indeed watching. Anelda, of course, as she always does every single evening. Serifing Washeng also dropping us a message down there. Benjamin Mwase, as well as Ponzo Ntia, and of course, so many of you at home. Paulina Nkosi, Tabiso Mufukeng, Sandy Stennett. I see you there on our Facebook page. Do keep the love coming. We absolutely love hearing from you. I think when we then look at, Luanda, the criteria for investing in commercial property. I mean, we talk a lot on the show, as I was saying earlier on, around residential property, and the viewers at home have a firm grasp of the criteria when we want to get financing for residential projects and different kinds of residential projects or properties. What is the criteria when we then sort of shift gear and look at commercial property?
All right, so the criteria always starts with your credit record and who is behind the consortium and the experience that those people have within that sector. And what I also typically see is that sometimes you have people who have such a great cause to set up a property business, but they forget that you cannot run each and every aspect of it by self. So you have to have different experiences that helps you build that portfolio, because the investors want to know who is managing that portfolio. And that is the one thing that will give the investor comfort to actually invest in your portfolio.
And I think that big thing around your credit score becomes so important, because it is something that gets harped on a lot as we talk about residential property. And I think some people may have the perception that when we do commercial, that's not something that's going to be important. But of course, it is something that remains important regardless of the type of the asset class that you go into. And one of the things that I've observed, Luanda, is that we've seen, particularly now during COVID, a number of office blocks sort of going for sale, or sometimes a particular space in an office block, for instance, whether, let's say, it's 100 square meter in a particular office block, it's now going for sale. We know that there are businesses who sometimes buy the office space that they're going to be using, as opposed to, for instance, renting it out. What would your sort of insight or advice or overlook be that you'd like to share to business owners who are trying to make that decision of should they buy their office space versus sort of renting out, or renting rather, an office space to use?
All right. Oh, this point in time, office space has been hit very hard. And I mean, with the change of physical attending to your business, you have an option to work from home. And we see a lot of people have actually evolved with COVID, and their production has gotten so much higher, and many of the companies are starting to think towards letting people work from home, because it cuts a whole lot of costs for them, and also people are much more relaxed, and they producing a lot more in that relaxed environment. However, for an investor, there was an article that I was reading which was alluding to giving South Africa at least 3 years before we can get back to the office space. And, we will be guided by the vaccine nation. If we all decide and we all believe that, the country is doing very well in terms of the vaccine, that's the guidance that, the office space will open up, whether, people are more comfortable to work in an environment where, if you've seen offices before, where they were like using very small desks and hotspots and that type of stuff. So now we're very scared to work next to, sitting next to this person, because we have to keep our social distancing. But I'm quite hopeful that the office space will get back, will gain its momentum in time. But for now, I see a lot of offices, they are actually converting their offices into residential homes. Some of them are converting them to low-cost housing. Some are looking at doing conversions to student accommodation, which have proved to make a lot more sense, rather than just letting a building sit empty. You have to think of innovative ways of making sure that it yields back the returns that you've put into it.
And when we look at that last bit that you've mentioned around the conversions, because we are seeing this quite a lot, particularly in the different metros across the board, what would be just your key do's and don'ts in the event where you're looking at the conversion? So you've got an office block, and perhaps you're looking at whether even doing student accommodation or making it resi. Any do's and don'ts that you'd like to highlight for us?
I would like to say investors, should not be hasty to do some of these conversions, because they cost quite a lot of money as well. So people have to think carefully of how best they can innovate their buildings, rather than just, running with a certain rush. I think this also opens up conversation with different areas of the market that would actually give guidance whether a certain conversion will make sense to your type of business, because not all the buildings can be converted to student housing. Not all of them can convert to residential. So there's a lot that one would have to take into consideration before you're doing those conversions.
And I think that's actually just quite a big one, because one of the things that I certainly also noted is that some investors do a huge rush with student accommodation, sometimes without adequately understanding even the scope or how to properly convert to student accommodation and the minimum standards from universities, and spent a lot of money converting a commune, for instance, or a normal house into a commune. But unfortunately, you find that sometimes those houses or those new buildings weren't compliant. So I do agree with the sentiment that they need to do better work in understanding where the market is before sort of rushing to the conversion, and really just getting a sense of And we do apologize for that. I see that the network was pulling a fast one on us. Luanda, as I was saying, when we talk about maximizing real estate, when we look at, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts when you look at the general trend of subletting a portion of a commercial property, is it a growing trend? Is it not? Because some people have, sometimes taken on more than they can chew and looking to potentially, sublet various parts of their particular property.
So I've seen a lot of that in the industrial space, where you have warehousing and you still have an office block. You look at a business like Take a Lot, where they will need certain offices for certain, work-related portions that they're doing. So subletting is very important, because now most of those industrial properties, I see them having like a mixture of retailers within their premises, and that also helps in a sense of the type of rental income that keeps rolling into your financials, because it focuses you, and then it gives you an idea of which business is actually going to survive this pandemic. And you also, as a landlord, you get to understand your rentals a lot more better. You know how to focus your business to yield the income that you require.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Luanda, I'm keen to hear from you what you'd say are probably some really great and lucrative investment strategies for people who are looking to go particularly into commercial property that they should be aware of and potentially even make use of.
All right, so one of the key things that I really enjoyed, that I loved so much, and it has been discontinued, and I think for me this would be an outcry to the government, is your Section 12J. I think Section 12J was actually very short-lived, and when people started opening their eyes to what Section 12J was all about, it was already taken away from us. Although, when you have some type of an incentive from the government that says to you, you can actually buy properties, and this is how best we can help you, especially with your returns, with your VAT, with the contributions that you're putting in there. It actually gives you a momentum. I mean, one of the key things I see is the stock fells, and I think with the stock fells, if they were to coordinate, their investments and look at how best they can, they can buy properties. They don't, to start a commercial property portfolio, you don't have to start by buying an acre of a property. You can start with a small cafe around the corner. And then just when the cafe is doing well, especially you look at the townships, you have those shops that we used to buy fat cakes from, and those shops are not working anymore. They used to be supermarkets, but they left unattended because we're now running to the shopping malls. I see great value in those, because you can start with opening up a small cafe again that will actually speak to your people, the community around you. You know exactly what it is that they need. If you live around the area, you have a good sense of what would be something that is viable within the community. And maybe in the long run, you can think about putting on, like looking at the zoning of that those shops. Look at how best you can position those shops to actually build some low-cost housing on top of them. And it's how you build that portfolio from zero to the best asset class that you could ever have. And the more you invest in a property, the better yield you get, or the better return you get from when you decide to sell the asset.
We're taking more of your comments and questions on our social media pages. We've got Sefiri Washeng saying, I've seen conversions in and around Joburg, ventilation compromised. You smell sunlight, bad soap, all the walkway. Wonder how they pass the structural in Tontun. And I think, Sefiri, we laugh, but I get exactly what you're saying. And I think, maybe Luanda, if you can comment on some of the corners that get cut, because I've also gone into some buildings where they've done recent conversions, and the ventilation is one thing that I also always pick up. The walls are always way too thin because oftentimes they use drywalling, and so you're also hearing somebody who's sort of 5 apartments down the hall from you, as opposed to only your neighbor, which I'm sure can be quite annoying. Some of if you can just comment for that, because I've seen it. I'm glad somebody said it who was watching the show, because it is unfortunately a thing that we see with some of the converted buildings.
Yeah, trust me, I've seen that as well. And it's the most, horrific thing, because you worry about safety. And we forget that first impressions last. If you have this little amount of money to put away to live in a low cost or a conversion or whatever, all you want is to have that sense of peace that says, wow, I've actually moved out from home. This is my sacred space. But a lot of newcomers, they like cutting corners, like you say. They don't take ventilation into play. They don't look at how best they can actually bring the sunlight in. Because some of them I've seen, it's so dark, you can barely even see. You have to keep the artificial lights on. So I think when we create conversions, one of the things I would love to say is that we need to think of ourselves. Would it make sense for me to live in this place? Would I love to live in this place? Because once you start thinking about yourself before you open it up to other people, because you are your best critic as well, and you know exactly the kind of spaces that you will thrive in. And we forget to take consideration that we have students always want to be happy, and exam time, they should also still feel like there is that happiness in the air, even though they are locked away in a room or something. Cutting corners, it's a total no-no, and people need to follow process. And also, just to add that following process can only enhance the price of your property. When you cut corners, no one wants to buy a building that is yet to fall. I mean, you walk into these buildings and you're thinking, okay, this one is about to fall on me. And
Yeah, no, I've heard those instances. I think sometimes when I view some of the buildings, there's a part of me that wishes I had my hard hat on, just in case there's anything that happens. And I'm sure how unbearable it probably is then for people who live there. And I think that the big thing there is for the landlords, the property investors, the property owners to have a fundamental grasp that low cost doesn't mean low quality. And we need to be clear that we can't be reducing costs at the expense of people's dignity where they live. Because as you say, your home is such a big thing, it's such a loaded thing. It isn't just a place where you're just sleeping and waking up. So we cannot at any point when we're housing people, exactly, and safe. We can't at any point when we're housing people, compromise on their dignity. And before I let you go, Luanda, any predictions for the sector for the coming year?
Well, the predictions would be, the great trends that I am seeing. I mean, I went to a conference in Sun City the past 2 days, and just looking at South Africa's economy. I mean, we're still a very young economy, and there is no way that we have used up all the space in our country. I believe there's still huge opportunities that we need to take advantage of. So we must not just rush into the same space because the friends are talking about these investments, but I just feel like as a country, there's so much more to be done. There is surfaces that are yet to be scratched, and the more we read, the more we understand the type of investment that you want to be involved in. Don't start anything until you know, because there's great opportunities coming up. Digital is one of the key things that young people who are techno-savvy can take advantage of. Innovation. I mean, innovation is not only just robots that are created, but innovation is how you believe you can make a shopper's shopping experience worth their while. There's a whole lot of things that are coming up, and I think we are actually going to do better. And as a country, there's so many other opportunities that we can tap into.
You quoted that conference that you were attending at Sun City the past 2 days. If I remember correctly, it's the SA Council of Shopping Centres that was hosting it. It was just interesting to. I wasn't attending it, but I've been following up on the developments in the conference, and I think the big thing for us is, of course, making sure that regardless of where in the property sector we provide value to the customers and provide really good value for money, make sure that we don't cut corners in whichever aspect we're in within the sector, because ultimately the customers are there, right? The customers are there, and we need to do a really great job at servicing those customers as best as we can. Luanda, we are going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And that is Luanda Tlhotlhalemaje, who is a commercial property specialist, wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. Unfortunately, our winner, Ustilo CJ Ronaldo, did not claim their prize this evening, and so we are going to be having a rollover. The team has just sent me a quick question from Umenzi. I'm going to squeeze it in. Actually, I really like this question. I'm going to squeeze it in, Menzi. And that is Umenzi Butilezi. He's asking, why is there no focus on replacing elevators during building conversions, especially when they get busy at night and you hear when they're busy at night and you can hear everything and you can't sleep at these low-cost connections. That's just a comment based on what we're saying about the noise. But the question there is, why is there no focus on replacing elevators during the conversion? If you can, I know one of the reasons why, but Luanda, if you can take the lift one, because we do see this one a lot. A lot of the buildings that have elevators, it's very old elevators, and they still aren't doing a great job when it comes to looking after them.
All right, so you guys know that elevators are a huge expense in the building, and they come with the design. And how are you going to get to the third floor? Because I know myself, as an athletic person that I am, I hate walking up the stairs, and I'm not going to be wearing my heels walking up the stairs. So that's why they do not replace the elevators. But it's actually also a very huge cost that has to be taken into consideration, because putting in a new elevator, it's
in the millions. Yeah. And that's literally why I think oftentimes elevators, very high cost. To the point where when you look at buying intersectional titles, for instance, that have elevators, so you're looking at buildings versus those in the same area that don't have elevators, you tend to find that the levy with the elevator buildings is higher than the non-elevators. Generally, all other factors remaining the same, and that's because of the servicing of the elevator and specialists having to come in and give a compliance certificate regularly. I was a trustee in a building where we had an elevator, and the number of times you have to constantly service it, make sure that everything is up to date. It's quite a high cost. So replacing it is not a conversation we quickly have. You kind of want to run it until the very, 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 very end. And if it's still fixable, you'd rather bring a technician in as opposed to buying a brand new one. Well, we've overstayed our welcome. Luanda, wanted to add there for a moment?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, as South Africans, if you find an old lift in your building, please be happy that you have it at least. I mean, I've traveled overseas. I've gotten into buildings where you have to go to the 5th floor, the elevator is not working. And yeah, that is not a nice thing, especially when you know that you have to go up those stairs every day and come down those staircases, every day. So yeah, I think we have the best ones. They're very old. The old buildings, you still have those old elevators that work. So that means some of these brands that were putting elevators in the old buildings, they did a very good job.
Well, that's exactly where we're going to leave it this evening. As I was saying earlier, we have overstayed our welcome. Luanda, thanks again for joining us on the show. And that's it for myself, Khumalo, and the rest of the Private Property Podcast team this evening. We'll be back on your screens tomorrow at 7 p.m. As it's a Thursday, you can catch Mbali Nwoko on the Farming Podcast. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
Bye.